Uh, the biggest theme that you can't miss throughout the book of Job is the fact that it deals with the reality of human suffering. At the heart of this is this whole problem of pain, as C.S. Lewis would call it. I mean, how do you deal with this? But alongside the problem of pain, we have a plea for justice. Does it make clear? So there is this problem. Not that we all suffer in the same, but Job has a way of articulating or wanting or calling, like, where is justice? Now, I look at that because young people, I'm not saying that we don't, but particularly young people are turning away from church and Christianity because it's not fair. I mean, they are like, I don't believe the leaders of the church would do this. I mean, can you believe this guy messed up with this moral issue? I'm like, do you know how much money that church swindled? So people think that we talk about this truth stuff, but we live in, that's not fair. So like the whole issue of justice, it bothers the millennials, and we lose credibility. So when they read this and like, what? This guy did everything good and look what happened to him. Why should I start doing that? Have you heard people talk like that? They do that all the time. I mean, he studied hard for the test and everything and he failed. I'm not going to take the Gnanakan's class. And people think like that. That's how they reason. So that's the first thing. If you like, again, this don't be bowled over by these funny words. It's just for my writing purpose. There is an existential purpose for this book. That is the reason we live and we experience life. Buddhism brought this out very clearly when Siddhartha Gautama said that living itself is suffering, dukkha. And someone said, well, duh, we know that. So he said, how do you escape dukkha? He said, thana. He said, you see, if you desire something, that is the problem. Thana is not desire. Thana is this craving for satisfaction. And he says, this is why you have pain. Because this life is never meant to satisfy. I mean, Henry, one of my friends in my mission organization, he suffered, he passed away. He was from Albuquerque, a very good friend of mine. And he had stories about the mission field in Cambodia. And I would say, Henry, would you come up and just share us? He said, Dr. G, do I need to come in front to share that? And I mean, he had all kinds of complicated problems. He actually died in his chair with a ruptured heart, and he was overweight and all that stuff. But I still remember, I said, Henry, yeah, why don't you come? He says, oh, I can come, but every part in my body that works hurts. You see, he said, Dr. G, you'll come to a time when every part in your body works, what? Hurts. Because listen, we're all deteriorating. This is life. And what Buddha and Buddhism is about is, he says, listen, if you have these you will be disappointed. Now, the answer is, what do you do? He says, well, get rid of desire. So I often ask my students, desire. Anyway, so, this whole question of suffering, philosophy of suffering, is why from Hinduism and karma, Buddhism, which is the fastest growing and most popular religion in the West. Did you know that? Zen Buddhism and the art of motorcycle maintenance. I mean, can you believe that? No, I'm not joking. All this stuff is going, Hollywood is full of this stuff. The whole mind control, selva control, yoga and all that, tantric, whatever. But, because people are looking for peace and oneness and everything, they just want to just get away from it. Now, the second aspect is to deal with the cause of suffering, which is, if you like, philosophical. Now, we're not going to delve into the philosophy of suffering. We're going to look at it in a very practical purpose for us as Christians. But I just want you to know that one of the emphasis in this book is the why question. Why bad things happen to good people, God's people? To wrestle with that love for wisdom. I want to inquire. And I told you, suffering is at the philosophy of every religion. So you can't be in philosophy without dealing with some form of evil and suffering. These are where did I come from? Where am I going? Why am I here? Why is this happening? It's very much. So we find this fierce debate about what is causing suffering. Now, I want to use an apologetic term. Don't throw up or anything, but we are talking about what they call the fallacy of the either-or. I'll explain this later in more details, or fallacy of falsehood, where they say there's only two options. And most of you didn't mention this, but the book of Job in its bulk is dealing with the whole issue of sin and what? Suffering. Is there a direct connection between sin and suffering? Not always. Is it sometimes? Like Miriam rebelled against Moses and God struck her with leprosy. Cause, effect, But not always is right. I mean, in John chapter 9, you find this guy who was born blind, and the disciples thought in terms of the fallacy of the either-or. Did he sin or did his? And Jesus said it's neither or. No, it's not either or, it's neither nor. It's so that God would display his glory and purpose through all this. So just keep that in mind. In the apologetics aspect, we're going to deal centrally with the fallacy of the either-or the whole understanding of how you create two options when there could be a third or fourth or many more. You're going to find there's many things. I'll come to that in detail. Now, the third issue has to do with sovereignty, and I've just put it here in terms of theology or spirituality, whichever you want. Is God really sovereign? Again, the issue we're going to look at is what we call theodicy. How can you reconcile a loving God who allows evil things to happen to his own people? Can you reconcile God sending innocent children before the age of accountability, or people who are mentally in some ways disabled to accept the gospel, or the heathen who've never heard it once, to hell? How can God allow? People ask that question. That's trying to reconcile how can God, who is loving, actually condemn people to hell and still be just about it? The justice of God, theodicy, is a central issue in the book of Job. We're going to struggle with that, and I'm going to show you some ways in which we can move on and show that God is still, who said sovereign, that God is still in control. But let's not say that before we first try to reconcile this. Is it fair? I mean, kids say that. That's not fair, really. So we're going to look at that. And finally, we're going to look at this in a pastoral, so existential, philosophical, theological, or spirituality, if you like. Today, people like that word, especially if you're Roman Catholic. All right, so the last one is pastoral, and that's why we're here at Heritage Church. Now, here's how I'm developing this for Word of Life. Facebook, you ask, are you going to do what? Like it. Are you my? I want to develop the book of Job, and I'll stop at this, with a theme of what? Friendship. Friendship. Anyone read a commentary with the book of Job with the theme of friendship? I think it's all over. I really believe. I'll just give you a little bit of an appetite this evening before we leave, so that you can take it with you home. For example, did you know Job? God calls Job his servant and friend at the end. Friend of God. I am a friend of God. Abraham was a friend of God. What does it mean to be friends with God? Job went beyond creator, and he says, you know what? I know my Redeemer, what? Lives. There is something about an eternal friendship with God. That's the most intimate relationship we have, to have a friend with God. Moses, friend of God, spoke to God how? Like a man would speak to his friend, face to face. I don't know. I just feel that we are losing this intimacy with God. that God's answer to the problem and puzzle of pain is Himself, His presence. And that's what happens from the whirlwind. Eventually, God comes to Job. I'm giving you the answer. I am convinced for millennials. You say, how do you know? I've got 2 daughters. I am convinced millennials don't need to be preached at. They don't want you to give them the answer. They don't even want you to help them solve their puzzles. Or maybe they want us to pay their bills, but solve their puzzles. But you know something? One thing, if you have, how many of you have teenagers? You know one thing teenagers need? That you'll be there with them. I will show you from the book of Job. I mean, I know these are 2 secular songs or sitcoms. Please don't tell Pastor Nathan I mentioned this in class. This will be my last class. But I'll tell you what, I have done surveys in Europe about America. Ask them what's your favorite American sitcoms, television shows. The top 2 rated that I did in my research, both have a little phrase in them. The top 2 rated television shows, both have this little phrase, I'll be there for you. I'll be there whenever you need me. If you haven't watched Friends and Baywatch, no, I'm not promoting. But no, that is the theme song. And you know what I'm talking about? Baywatch and Friends, I'll be there for you. This is what millennials need. And you know what else? I want to confess, I just crossed the speed limit. I'm over 55. But I want people to be just there for me. And you, in your suffering, the most important thing you need is someone to just be there.